Alright, so I've been bored to tears in the MLB lockout like the rest of you, and I decided to post on Twitter one day about the worst lineup card that I had ever seen. Obviously this was hyperbole because there's plenty of bad lineups out there, and you guys decided to respond in droves about your favorite team's worst lineup. So I thought, hey, if the research is already done for me, why not compile them all into a video? And that's exactly what we're gonna do. This is gonna be a two-part video series for the worst MLB lineups for each MLB team. Now, I want to stress that most of these are within the past 10 years because it was easier to find footage of these games, but still, these are some seriously bad lineups with some really fun forgotten names in them. More often than not, I want to include players in some forgotten series videos, but they don't have enough of a resume to warrant their inclusion. But in this type of video, I can include them at free will. So you're going to see a lot of names you probably haven't heard of in a long time. Today we're going to do the National League, which means we're going to do 15 teams, and next time we'll do the American League. Let's waste no more time and jump right in. We're going to start off with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who just had their second season losing more than 100 games in 2021. So naturally, their worst lineup is going to come from this most recent season. This lineup from July against the Colorado Rockies featured a lineup with an OPS all under 751, which is not good. With Ketel Marte resting, this D-backs lineup looks like it belongs in AAA, maybe even AA. You got Brian Holiday, an all-time journeyman catcher, batting 8th, Josh Reddick, who was signed off the couch mid-season, hitting 5th and struggling bad, but my personal favorite is a guy that I didn't really hear of this season, who was Stuart Fairchild. I had never heard of him before researching this video, but I feel like he has that famous actor type of name, but maybe that's just me. They lost 9-3 and dropped 40 games below 500. Next up is the Atlanta Braves, and it feels cheap to throw in late season lineups here with the old 40-man roster rule, but this lineup from 2015 is too good, or I guess too bad not to include. It's hard to remember, but there was a time when the Braves weren't running the NL East every year. In the middle of their rebuild was the 2015 season where they lost 95 games. The last day of the season had them play a doubleheader against the St. Louis Cardinals, leaving them shorthanded for the nightcap. Besides Michael Bourne at the top, there isn't a recognizable face in sight, but plenty of forgotten fun names. Hector Olivera batting 3rd, Red Sox legend Pedro Ciriaco in the lineup. The Braves miraculously swept the doubleheader, winning this night game 2-0 as Matt Whistler came 1 out shy of a shutout. That's crazy. Up next, we got the Chicago Cubs, and I was extremely close to picking the lineup from the day after the 2021 trade deadline, especially because Rafael Ortega clubbed 3 homers out of nowhere, but I think that lineup should be remembered fondly and not be laughed at, being that it's kind of the start of a new era for Cubs fans. So instead, we're going to jump back to 2013, when the club had none of its glory yet and was still wandering aimlessly throughout every season. This early August lineup against the Philadelphia Phillies saw Junior Lake leading off, a cleanup tandem of Dioner Navarro and Wellington Castillo behind the dish, a guy named Thomas Neal who even stumped me, and Donnie Murphy clubbing 2 home runs in the 8-hole. The Phillies blew this game in the 9th inning because it's a tale as old as time. For the Cincinnati Reds, I pondered putting in any of their lineups that were no-hit by Roy Halladay, Mike Fiers, and Jake Arrieta, but in all honesty, those lineups aren't really bad at all. The Reds have always kind of been an offensive powerhouse, so instead of those games, let's go to one in 2015, shortly after the team canned Dusty Baker unceremoniously and went into a tailspin. In their August matchup with the Diamondbacks, the Reds sent out a lineup with 5-hitter Brian Pena, who always wore the double-flapped helmet, so respect to him. We also have Yankees legend Ryan Lamar in the 8-hole, and Jason Borges at the top of the lineup. I know it's pronounced Borges, but I always just want to pretend he's a sophisticated Frenchman and say bourgeois. This lineup ended up getting shut out by Chase Anderson, big surprise there. You'd think that finding a bad lineup for the Colorado Rockies would be pretty difficult, being that they always succeed offensively because of Coors Field, and aside from their miracle 2007 run and the fun wildcard teams from a few years back, there are actually a ton of really bad Rockies lineups to choose from. Let's take a look at the 2012 squad, a 98-loss team with a surprisingly bad offense. They had a garbage time series against a bad Cubs squad in late September, and it seems like everyone got the same off day, which made for one of my favorite lineups from today's list. Some of these names are awesome. MLB The Show legends Tyler Colvin and Jordan Pacheco batting 2nd and 3rd, rookie standout Willeen Rosario behind the dish, Mets legend Andrew Brown, and of course DJ LeMahieu casually rounding out the bottom of the order. This lineup ended up scoring 10 runs somehow. For the Los Angeles Dodgers, it was particularly hard to find a bad lineup since the team has been dominant for the past decade. I could have gone to their mid-2000s rosters to find the wasteland of mediocre lineups, but a rare thing happened to them in 2021. For a little while, the Dodgers kinda suck. Injuries bit them harder than basically any team in the league, and by late July, the lineup they were sending out daily was getting worse and worse. The particular worst worst one was in a 1-0 win over the Rockies, where their 4 through 8 hitters were basically just scraps they found from around the league. Billy McKinney on his 3rd team of the season, Sheldon Newsy, who never panned out how they planned, and Austin Barnes protecting 41-year-old Albert Pujols in the 4-5 hole. Even through their worst month, they still went 14-12 because they're the Dodgers. For the Marlins, I could have chose from a lot of the bad teams in the early 2010s, but I'm gonna go back to the pandemic season for them. You're gonna see a few entries from the 2020 season because of how weird everything was, but no teams had things go more strangely than the Marlins. After losing half of their roster to COVID and being forced to play low-level minor leaguers just to field a team, the team still managed to win 9 of their first 13 and then finish the season 31-29, securing the 6th seed in the NL. They even managed to oust the Cubs in the wildcard series and face their division rival in the Atlanta Braves next round. The team was definitely a story of triumph, but the lineup they sent out in some of these pivotal games in 2020 was, it was kind of funny. Not much they could have done with their injuries on the 14th game of the season, but Francisco Cervelli batting 3rd, Logan Forsythe 5th, and Eddie Alvarez rounding out the bottom will forever hold a place in my heart. The guy was an Olympic figure skater, that's pretty cool. But they were promptly shut out in back-to-back games and swept out of the NLDS by the Braves later on. For the Brewers, I'm choosing a lineup that may not be the worst lineup in their history, but considering the circumstances of the game, I'm definitely going to include it. This is another pandemic season lineup. We mentioned that the 2020 season was weird, and a big gripe I had with it was 16 teams making the playoffs. Most of you know that the Brewers snuck in with the 8th seed and had zero business being there. They were overmatched against the 1-seeded Los Angeles Dodgers, who eventually won the whole damn thing, but in a do-or-die wildcard elimination game, Milwaukee sent out this starting 9. Even in the shortened season, Ryan Healy made just 7 plate appearances in 2020 and somehow batted cleanup. Doesn't make much sense to me. Obviously, Clayton Kershaw shut them out easily, and the Brewers were sent home in 2 games. For my beloved New York Mets, there are a ton of great choices for the worst lineup from the early 2010s wasteland of mediocre rosters, but my favorite pick actually comes from their NL championship year in 2015 in the debut game of Steven Matz. They had scored just 20 runs in their last 10 games heading into this one, with an 8-game losing streak sandwiched in between. The injury-plagued Mets sent out a lineup featuring Ruben Tejada going 0 for 5 in the 2-hole and a 5 through 8 combination of AA hitters. Luckily, Steven Matz somehow went 3 for 3 and pitched into the 8th inning to get them a much-needed victory over the Reds. There's also another Mets-Reds game that I want to include because it's a funny footnote to me, and it's the hangover lineup after they clinched the NL East. Kelly Johnson was playing shortstop, Kevin Plawecki batted cleanup, Dilson Herrera needs no introduction, and he hit a home run in this game, and they won the game 8-1. This was a game that didn't matter, so I'm just going to tack it on at the end here, and we're going to move on. For the Phillies, they've improved in recent seasons, but my favorite characteristic about bad Phillies lineups is how little they care about defensive quality. Their most famous bad lineup in recent time is famous for that very reason, also known as the 3 first baseman lineup. This came at the end of the 2018 season, an average year in Philly, and an improvement on the recent basement-dwelling seasons. Offensively, this lineup isn't bad at all, really, but when you have Carlos Santana playing third base for some reason, Rhys Hoskins way out in left field so Justin Bour can play first, Wilson Ramos behind the dish, and a 33-year-old Asdrubal Cabrera taking over shortstop, it's a miracle this team made 0 errors throughout the game. For the Pittsburgh Pirates, their submission is unsurprisingly going to come from the 2021 season, as they put out some abysmal lineups in their 101-loss campaign. Way back on May 12th against the Reds, Pittsburgh put out the lineup with the worst combined OPS of any team this year. Kevin Newman, who was hitting in the 2-hole, had an OPS plus difference of 84 compared to the opposing 2-hitter in Jesse Winker, for reference. The Pirates surprisingly kept this one knotted at 1-1 thanks to great pitching from Trevor Cahill in the bullpen, but they lost 5-1 in 10 innings. Although the Padres missed the playoffs in 2021, their roster is far more talented from that of the early 2010s teams. With the athleticism of some of their position players now, we seem so far removed from the mediocre lineups that were put out just 5 years ago. Take this lineup from the 2017 season against the Mets. Some of these names are awesome. Chase Darno, brother of Travis Darno, Matt Caesar, who has one of the most confusing last names ever. Minor league journeymen infest this lineup from top to bottom, but 6 of the 8 position players here all registered a hit, and this was enough for a 4-3 win. And it all took place in the pouring rain because it was a miserable game all around. For the Giants, this is another one of those end of season already clinched hangover lineups that's just hilarious to look back on, especially considering that this was in 2012, where the Giants would win their second World Series in 3 years. But on September 23rd, they were not a lineup of champions. No Buster Posey, Marco Scutaro, Angel Pagan, Brandon Belt, Hunter Pence, or Brandon Crawford made for a fun starting 9. Joaquin Arias in the 3-hole, Mets legend Xavier Nady behind him, and then a trio at 6, 7, 8 that any sane person should not recognize. I recognize all the names because I'm insane. Even the mediocre 2010s Padres were able to conquer this lineup handily. For the Cardinals, this one comes from the end of the 2019 season, despite the team winning 91 games and the NL Central that year. It's a lineup full of guys who weren't stars yet, the type of player that St. Louis loves to trade away, especially if you're an outfielder. Randy Arozarena manning center field and Tyler O'Neill in left field usually should mean the lineup is solid, but when you're batting Matt Wiener's cleanup and a guy named Rangel Ravello third, things can get pretty funny pretty quickly. Also, the best home run call of all time belongs to Ravello. Check this out.
Ravello! Knock me down. Hello, goodbye. There you go. Knock me down, there you go. Bye-bye. And then take a trot.
In all honesty, this one isn't a terrible lineup since there's not tons of bad Cardinals teams to choose from. It's just funny reading some of the names that were on this squad not too long ago. Last up on the list is the Washington Nationals, and I could have taken a lineup from 2021, but I did that for some other teams on this list, so it felt a bit cheap. Instead, we're going to turn the clock back a couple years to that special 2019 season, but before all the fun stuff happened. As most of you know, the Nationals started the season 19-31, and we're going to hop to the middle of that tough stretch. Injury-plagued and lacking offensive firepower, the Nationals sent out a May 5th lineup against the Phillies that included Kurt Suzuki batting cleanup, Wilmer Difo in the two-hole, and something called Jake Knoll at first base, one of the few recent obscure MLB players that stumped even me. The Phillies defeated them handily 7-1, sending their record to 14-19, a record that they'd never recover from. And that'll do it for all my National League teams, and stay tuned for part 2 coming soon where we talk about the worst American League lineups that I could find. That'll do it for this video. I'm the Jolly Olive, and I'll see you guys next time.